Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is absolutely going to be a different video than what I usually do. And so I usually pick a topic or a passage of scripture and just kind of talk about how it relates to the life of Jesus and how you can apply it to your life. This is definitely going to be more of a testimonial, and merely because 2024 has been probably one of the scariest and heaviest years of my life. And I truly am not over everything that happened to me in 2024, but I want to get this out there to first see my progress in 5 years, to see, what the Lord was teaching me now. But also because I want to talk about what I'm going through in the middle of it, and so I remind myself to be content with what the Lord has taught me. And I also think and pray and hope that my story and what happened to me touches and reaches the right people and leads them closer to the Lord, because I know that's why I'm here, and I know that is I hope that everything that went down in 2024 blesses someone with what the Lord has taught me. And so, to preface, most of my life I have struggled with hypochondria and just general fear, honestly, and anxiety, but hypochondria specifically. And so if you don't know what hypochondria is this idea that you always think something is wrong with you physically. So you always think that there's some internal sickness or internal something. Or you think that it's just this general fear of something bad happening to you, to your physical body, to your health, whatever that looks like. And there's definitely levels to it, and throughout my life it was definitely triggered through being a child of a divorce, or having men in my life who I didn't feel protected by. And so a lot of times it can flow, and so through massive moments of my life with trauma, it definitely popped up a little more with that anxiety, and then through moments of more hilltop moments, I didn't feel it as much. And so it's a wave for me, for sure. But I've always struggled with it ever since I was young. I can't honestly remember being young and not thinking about something potentially bad is going to happen to my health. And so the enemy knew that, let me tell you. He definitely knew that, and he knows how to push the buttons of your fear, absolutely. And so this past summer, I had a stroke, and which is just crazy. And even now, talking about it is it's actually wild, because I'm 23 years old. I work out most every day. I eat relatively healthy. I make sure that I'm active. It's all these things kind of don't contribute to a stroke. So anyway, I had a stroke, and really, really scary, honestly. I think one day I'll be able to tell the details of everything that happened. And even now, thinking about it, it definitely raises that anxiety for me. But I know that in talking about it and reminding myself what the Lord has done, that's gonna be huge for all the anxiety that I'm experiencing, and therapy. And so from the stroke, it was a really confusing time. When it happened, it was just a shock, and I went in to go see a doctor. They did an MRI. They found out that it was a stroke. Half my body went numb. It was the craziest experience of my life, and the scariest experience of my life. And my main question was why, but in two ways. And so first way was, why God? Because this is my main fear, is that something bad was going to happen. And my second question of why is, why did this happen? Logistically, what in my body caused this to happen? And so from the time of the stroke in the emergency room, I wasn't able to go see a neurologist until 2 months after. Let me tell you, those 2 months I have never experienced anxiety in a waiting season like that in my life. I've been in waiting seasons, single waiting seasons. I've been in waiting seasons for jobs. I've never experienced a anxiety like that in my life. And so during those 2 months, chest pains, headaches, blurry vision, which are all also like pre effects of a stroke. And so not only was my anxiety making me feel actually deathly sick, but the deathly sick from anxiety was triggering what I felt before my stroke. And so those 2 months were actually like disgustingly awful for me. And I just have never experienced anxiety like that, and I pray that I never do again. And again, I've experienced anxiety almost my whole life, but to that extent, it was rough, and there was so much anxiety in that waiting. Anyway, so I eventually see a neurologist, and they do kind of another MRI. They do some heart scans, and so what they found was that I was taking a medication during the summer, which they told me to get off anyway, just in case. So I was off of it anyway. I was taking a medication during the summer that caused my blood to clot, and the neurologist told me, that's absolutely it, because that blood clot was in your brain. But it's interesting how the blood clot got to your brain, because there's no passageway unless you have a hole in your heart. And he was like, it's kind of possible if you don't have that hole in your heart for that blood clot to go up, but you may have one. So they did another heart scan, and I was praying. I was like, Lord, please do not let there be a hole in my heart, because that's a whole other thing that I thought I would just get off this medication and be okay, but this is a whole other thing that I have to deal with, and I didn't want to. I want it to be done. And I did that heart scan, and they did find this hole that was in my heart. So let me tell you about this hole in my heart. Everyone is born with a hole in their heart. So at the day you're born, you have a hole, a little flap in your heart, and it's open. Now, for 75% of the population, that hole, that flap, closes and the skin tightens together, and it kind of forms that whole heart. Not the hole in your heart, but your heart being whole. And for 25% of the population, that hole never closes, and so it remains this like flap of door that like can easily let blood through. And that was mine. And so the medication caused the blood clot. The blood clot passed through the flap in my heart, the little hole in my heart, went up to my brain, caused a stroke. That's where we're at. And that was not fun finding out, because I really wanted to be done with everything, and realizing that there was a whole other procedure that needed to be done to my heart in order to prevent future strokes is really terrifying for me. It was overwhelming. Honestly, this year has been overwhelming, and I still feel very overwhelmed. And so, in January we're having that procedure, and from here to January I'm just waiting to get it over with, because, I'm done. And so what they're going to do is they're going to get a little like mesh circle and just fill that hole. And, it's not open heart. They go through both my esophagus and pelvic bone and all these things. Really crazy stuff. Modern medicine is wild. So let's talk about the spiritual side of everything that's going on in my life during this time, and how that can relate to you, because I don't want this to be you listening to me rant about my life. I want it to apply to your life specifically, because I want this to build your faith or allow you a perspective of God that you haven't seen before in a new light. And so, gosh, there was so much fear. There has been so much fear in my life through this. And one of the main things that I just keep repeating in my brain is that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of sound mind. I think every day I want to pray for a sound mind, because when my fear takes over for me personally, it attacks my anxiety, it attacks my relationships, it attacks the way I talk to people, it attacks the way that I go about my daily life, it attacks the way that I work, it attacks my the way that I achieve things, it attacks everything. And so in order to trust God, it means to fear God. And let me tell you, after an event like this, I'm perfectly capable of fearing a God who, I don't know, it's been a wild ride. So let's let's talk about that idea of fear and that idea of trust, and what that looks like for these spiritual holes in your life. Because I thought it was really interesting how it wasn't a, like a artery that was wrong. It wasn't a vein that was wrong. It wasn't just the blood clot that was wrong. It was a physical hole in my heart. How many times have you heard a pastor talk about filling the holes in your heart, and you didn't even think about the potential of there being a physical hole in your heart? Like, that blew my mind when he told me that, this idea that that there was a hole in my heart. Crazy. Like, it just blows my mind. So, there are a lot of things that I have learned from the physical side of having a hole in your heart that relate to the spiritual side of having a hole in your heart. And so let's talk about the spiritual holes. You will only notice the hole in your heart, the spiritual hole in your heart, that you have when suffering arises. So here's the thing. If I never had that stroke, I would have never known that there was a hole in my heart. If I didn't have that blood clot to perfectly orchestrate that stroke for me, I would have never known that there was a hole, and I would have had more chances of cardiovascular and heart diseases in the future. So I'm really trying to see the blessing in all in real life, in spiritual life, if you've got a hole in your heart that you're not filling with the Lord, you are only going to notice that hole to its extent when you are in rock bottom, when you experience trauma, when you have tried everything that you can to fill that hole. You are only going to know that it's there when you have nothing left to fill it with. Because the only lasting thing to fill it with is the Lord. And here's the thing, this is not just a message to unbelievers. This is a message to all people. Because us as believers fill that hole pretty rapidly with religion, with relationships, with just daily activities, which are not bad things. That's the thing, is like, these are not bad things. But when you are trying to fill an eternal spiritual hole with a temporary physical thing, it's not going to fit. It's not going to work. And you're going to hit rock bottom and realize that there's only one thing that you need to fill that hole in your heart, and it's the Lord. And it's what He promises you, and it's His life for you. And so I also thought it was interesting how the doctor told me that the hole, physical hole in my heart, is shaped like a door, and so it's like a flap that opens with blood. And so in our spiritual lives, the hole in your heart is a door that sin enters and messes with your mind. Let me tell you this whole analogy, because this is crazy to me when the Lord brought this to me. Let's recap on the stroke thing. Blood clot flows through the hole in my heart, affects my brain to a point where I cannot move or feel the left side of my body for a few hours. In your spiritual life, when sin enters that hole in your heart, the first place that it's going to go is your brain. The first place that it's going to stop the holy blood of Jesus Christ from affecting your life is your brain. And it's going to stop movement. It's going to stop the parts of the body, hint, spiritual church body, from working in the way that it was supposed to work. And so, again, that door can only be shut and glued tight from sin with the Lord and with what He offers you. Now, as the hole heals, a filter arises. And so I also thought it was this whole thing is just, it's really cool how the Lord works. And so what they're going to do with my heart is they're going to put like this, again, this mesh little filter that filters out the blood clots. And even with people, 75% of the population, with people who have that hole filled, it acts as a filter, filtering out blood clots in your body, not letting it go to your lungs, not letting it go to your brain, not letting it go to your, however, wherever else a blood clot can go. So when our spiritual hole heals, when the Father comes and we ask him to fill that hole, and we actually leave room for him to fill that hole, he acts as a filter for sin, and that acts as like this conviction that shows us right from wrong. And so I thought that was really interesting how this like whole door thing and filter thing really just show themselves in our spiritual life. And so where are you, and what are your holes in your life? Let me tell you about my holes in my life. The hole in my life that I've experienced since day one is this hole and this constant yearning for validation. And whether that be from in my relationships, whether that be from parental figures, whether that be from all these things, I have always craved validation. And so this whole experience with my stroke and thinking about what the holes in my life, my spiritual life are, really have opened my eyes to how little I need validation and how desperately I want validation. And so I ask myself, what would happen? I'm letting a doctor fill this physical hole in my heart. And so what would happen if I let God fill this spiritual hole in my heart? What would happen if I let God fill that need for validation, fill that need for a man or a person in my life to take care and love me fully? What would that look like? Because I'm trusting a doctor. Can I not trust God? And so I want you to ask yourself what those holes are in your life. You're trusting people with certain things. Can you also trust the God of the entire universe to take care of that hole in your life for you? Whether that hole is this desperate need for a relationship, whether that hole is validation like me, whether that hole is gluttony and you're constantly seeking food for physical and spiritual satisfaction, and whether that hole is relationships and you just want more and more community and you don't realize that you have the eternal Trinity as community with you all the time. Whatever these idols look like for you, what would it look like to trust in a God who has always been there for you and wants to fill that hole? Because a lot of things that we want to fill that hole don't even want us. The enemy wants us to under his wing so that we can be apart from God. All of these things are pulling us away from God when we idolize them. God actually wants us and cares for us and wants what's best for us. And so there were quite a few personal lessons, let me tell you. And I'm actually going to post on Instagram about all this because there's just too much to say in a video. And the main thing I want you guys to hear is this spiritual whole thing, is like, what can you learn from that? So the first personal lesson that I learned is to understand healing. I had to want a relationship with the healer. Now, a lot of times, at least for me, my stubbornness can get in my way and my self-righteousness can get in my way, and I can say, you know what, I can do this all on my own, and I know I need God, but in this moment, let me just do it by myself and let me try to figure it out on my own. To understand healing, I have to want a relationship with the healer, and that pulled me out of this repetitive spirit of religion and allowed me to see what spiritual holes I had. And so if I just said, you know what, I just want to be healed and I'm just going to try to do it by myself, and I know God is a good God, but I don't know why he's doing this, and da-da-da-da. If I didn't ask questions and I didn't dig deeper and I didn't relate this to spiritual life, I would be stuck in religion and not realizing what I'm missing out on. And so this pulled me out of that, this mindset of I can do it on my own and I don't need a God, and into this relationship where I have a God who wants to heal me in a spiritual way. And on the way, if he wants to fill that hole in my heart before surgery, amen to that. But if not, he is healing me spiritually, and my soul is the eternal one, not my physical body. The last lesson I want to talk about comes from Jonah 4, and so I'm going to read some verses in Jonah 4 and then explain, because the Lord really spoke to me through this during those moments of anxiety, the 2 months that I was waiting for that neurologist. And so it's Jonah 4, starting in verse 6, it says, "And God arranged for a leafy plant to grow there, and soon it spread its broad leaves over Jonah's head, shading him from the sun. This eased his discomfort, and Jonah was very grateful for the plant. But God also arranged a worm. The next morning at dawn, the worm ate through the stem of the plant so that it withered away. And the last part says, "You feel sorry for the plant, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and died quickly. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city?" That's where the chapter ends, which I always thought was wild. We never heard Jonah's response. Let me tell you something about your discontentment, because Jonah not only was discontent in what the Lord offered him as a mission, but he also lived in that discontentment, and so the Lord had to take things away from him. Your discontentment with your temporary fills, so your temporary fills of like whatever you're putting in the hole of your heart, your discontentment with that gives God the opportunity to take away things until you see that He is the only true filling. You'll see how contentment is the only thing you can have, and God will be, you'll see that contentment is the only thing that you have with God, and you'll see that God is the only true option. Because let me tell you, for years of my life, and I know that everyone can relate to this, is that for years of our life we spend so much time filling our hole with such temporary things, and if the rapture happened tomorrow, or you died tomorrow, or whatever theology looks like for you in that, if that happened tomorrow for you and you met God face to face, gosh, do you not think the weight of your disappointment, of filling up your heart with your boyfriend, or filling up your heart with this need for validation, or filling up your heart with food, or filling up your heart with these like awful relationships that are toxic, or filling up your heart with watching movies that maybe aren't good for your spiritual life? Don't you think the weight of your disappointment is going to fill up when you look in the eyes of the Father who could have healed you your whole life? Like, I have this new, and I've thought about this before, but like, of course, this whole physical hole in my heart is really reminding me every single day that I need to fill the hole in my heart. But I hope that this is a good reminder for you in understanding what those spiritual holes look like, what you can do to fill them, and how detrimental it is when they're just left unfilled, and when they're left filled with things that don't really matter in the end and aren't eternal. And so that's a lot, and I would so appreciate your prayers in everything that's coming up with the heart surgery, with everything else. The Lord has given me a sense of peace. Bless up for that, because 13-year-old me would be freaking out, and probably last year me would be freaking out right now. And so, if you struggle with hypochondria, if you struggle with general anxiety about your health, know that you're not alone. And know that there are absolutely people, including me, that would love to talk to you about it. But also know that you serve a God who is Jehovah Rapha, which is God that heals. Like, you serve a God that doesn't just heal, but wants to heal you. And if that's just spiritually, you have to be content with that. And so, anyway, I just have learned so much, and I know I'm going to learn more, but I just thought I would share a little bit about what's going on and how the Lord has really spoken to me through this. So I really appreciate you listening. And again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to add anything to this, comments are open. Leave me an Instagram DM, whatever that looks like. And I really appreciate you for watching.